The team here at the press office do our best to, at least within our social circles, get feedback from members of the community about how you want your government to communicate. When we do, we get one consistent response. We want less press releases. Modern communications are ever-changing, but as trends, platforms, and algorithms evolve, one clear reality emerges. People today want direct, personal, and unmediated access to the work of their political leaders and public servants. They want less pre-packaged messages, less choreographed photo opportunities, and less scripted narratives. They want real people and real talk about the issues that affect them. Unfortunately, most of the content on social media is short and superficial, geared mostly at creating emotional engagement. But amid viral challenges and rage bait, a new countercultural format has taken hold: the podcast. In it, people usually discuss things from a more personal angle and have the time and the space to dive into big picture conversations and the big questions of our time. This is exactly what we want to do here. Small filter, big picture. Inwards for issues that affect the public sector, and outwards to inform the wider community. Close to home, but with an ear to the wider world. Welcome to Not Another Press Release. So, Chief Minister, welcome to Not Another Press Release. I'm going to call you Fabian because the whole point is to try and get closer to our political leaders, but not just political leaders, senior civil servants, people that people want to know a little bit more about on a personal capacity.
And that is my name.
It is your name, yeah. Are you familiar with the term vibe check?
Vibe check? No, that's a new one on me.
So vibe check is what the young people use to sort of ask you, how are you doing? How are things going?
Yeah.
So, how are you doing? How are things?
I suppose I'm better than I thought I would be, because we are now recording at a time when we've already had text on the European Union treaty. We're in the final stages of checking that text. The Gibraltar Cabinet has approved the pre-scrubbed text. And that has been a real, difficult negotiation. It's taken a long time. It's a very dense document that we are coming back with annexes and protocols and administrative agreements and memoranda of understanding. All of that is being intellectually very difficult. It's taken a lot out of me, probably more than anything else that we have done. So I'm feeling good, man, because we've got that text.
Nice. Has it been easier than you thought it was going to be? Has it been harder?
No, it has been harder than I thought it was going to be. I think all of us who were in the room when in the virtual room, when we did the New Year's Eve agreement, thought that we could now very quickly turn this into a document. Maybe we might have thought it was going to take, 6 months or a year. It's taken 5. Yeah. It's taken 5, and it's been 5 very tough years. By the time we finish, it would have been 6 and a bit. And now ratification and implementation, none of which can be taken for granted. They're all very difficult things. And as my children say, when I talk to them about politics and why I'm still in it, having said that I wanted to go, although they want me to stay, ironically, they said, but why is it taking so long? This treaty that you talked to us about, that you say is so important for us, that is the reason that you're saying, why is it taking so long? I have to say to them, because it's important. And if it's important, we've got to get it right. We can't just do it quickly, because like any road, if you build it quickly, you'll soon be repairing it. And this is a road that we need to travel for many, many decades. And we can't be digging it up every 5 minutes.
Okay. So I asked, in those kind of, young person kind of terms about how you're feeling, because I want to start talking about the Fabian Picardo of the beginning of his political career. And the first conversations that you and I had were in the context of filming Lives of Our Leaders. And I was trying to find a line that would define each of the chief ministers accurately. And the one I found for you, I think also was one of the ones that generated the most consensus with the people that I then went on to discuss your political life, was a new leader for a new age. And I was hitting at the fact that you came into politics sort of young, fresh-faced, full of energy, but also ready to embrace new technology, particularly social media. You know? And in your communications, you created this very stark contrast with this previous leader that suddenly started to look very old-fashioned and very out of touch. You know? And that's, I think, what made your political platform successful. I've also seen the evolution of this. And not only have I seen the evolution of social media from a place that was very organic and where there was a lot of lively political discussion. I remember those days of Gibraltar political social media, to now something that's dominated by algorithms that tend to polarize people, that many people describe as like places that are toxic, even they describe as sewers. And I've seen you also become more and more frustrated with the medium and talk about the people who fall for the trappings of the medium as you know, sometimes being idiots and using very strong language that you rarely see politicians use. How do you feel about that transition? Or how do you feel about social media today in comparison to what it was, and also your role in it?
Well, I can tell you, I was very excited about new media, as we might call it, in 2010, 2011, principally at that stage, Facebook, and Twitter, and the beginning of Twitter. It was an almost innocent new landscape, you know. The concept of friends on Facebook was real. I mean, the people who were on Facebook who connected with you were your friends, and you had the ability to send them very quickly what you were doing and what you were thinking, and they could react to that, and they could engage with you and see what you were doing. And so for me, in the context of the psychology of politics, something that a lot of people don't talk about, and we would need a lot of time to talk about, the key issue was, in a very tightly contested election, as I expected 2011 was going to be, when people went into that voting booth, if they had to make a choice between Peter and Fabian, they would more likely vote for the person who in their head they had decided was their friend. And that was the magic of Facebook translated into the psychology of politics. He is my friend. So I had lots of people who were my friends, who I believed would vote for me in a general election. I also reached out to a lot of people who I knew, or because they were simply in Gibraltar and in the franchise, I could reach out to and make them a friend. And that meant that my constituency of support grew very quickly. And the other side were not there. Peter wasn't on Facebook. In fact, I think it was Peter who was the first person ever to refer to social media as sewers in those early days, and when they were far from the negative environment that they are now. I mean, I still remember that at that time, it was very innovative to be able to communicate a document, for example, to people directly, rather than tell traditional media about it. Traditional media interpret it and explain the document to people. The effectiveness of for people to have a particular question in Parliament or whatever themselves, which we all understand, was something which was very, very new then. But how have things changed? If you look at social media today, and I would include WhatsApp and Telegram in the concept of social media today, those are new. Instagram is new. Threads is new. Mastodon is new. Blue Sky is new. There are so many mechanisms, and what's happening on there is so different. And so you've used the word toxic. Yeah, so toxic. I would describe the whole thing now as anti-social media, because you go on there, you say something, and 20 or 30 people who are anonymous will say the most deprecating, horrid thing that they would never say to your face, and they wouldn't say in their own name. Some people in their own name will say a horrid thing about you just going for a run and trying to show people that despite the fact that you're in your mid-50s, you can start running. That's good for your health, and you try and get others to follow in that vein. And so I've really fallen out of love with social media. I don't see myself doing much on social media. When I'm not a politician, I still have to use it to communicate institutionally with people. That's important. But fíjate what I'm doing. I'm using social media to engage more with traditional media. So I now go on social media to see the latest thing that's on the Times, the latest thing that's on the Chronicle, the latest thing the GBC is saying. So I'm looking at those trusted sources of information, but finding that they are updating, of course, not their websites, because that's a different sort of internet function, but they're updating their social media with their stories before their main news programs, before their publication moment. So I'm engaging more with that. I am just, totally ignoring, the cowards who are hiding behind fake names. If somebody comes with a fake name and says something on my feed, I immediately block them, whether they're a Spanish troll or whether they are an apparently Gibraltarian, coward. I just block them. The idea that people can't say things in their name because of retaliation in Gibraltar, no, that's for the birds. It is not to put a finer point on it. It is bollocks that there is going to be an attempt to do something nasty to someone simply because they say, Chief Minister, I completely disagree with you. I think that this policy is wrong. You're wrong. And in my view, you're not the best Chief Minister Gibraltar's ever had. I think you're the worst Chief Minister that's ever had. The thought that would lead somebody to find themselves in a difficult situation in any particular respect is complete nonsense. That's not how politics works. But there is a conspiracy theory, which is not just a social media conspiracy theory. It's a general, Gibraltar conspiracy theory that if you say something against the then elected politician, you will forever be somebody who's not going to be able to get things that you're otherwise entitled to as a citizen. This is like the great other Gibraltar theory that is constantly out there, that every politician is corrupt, that the minute they're in politics, they're taking 10%. Again, for the birds, but it seems to be the prevailing view. So
not just in Gibraltar, also.
Yeah,
well, the general anti-establishment narrative. Yeah,
exactly. But there is that sort of constant thought of that. And social media has become a breeding ground for that. And you're right, a lot of people are falling, and my main concern is this: they're falling for conspiracy theories. So somebody will say, oh, I believe that this type of medicine causes this type of problem and you should never take it. Guy who's never studied medicine, has decided to buy a couple of cameras and a microphone and says that, and people start to fall for it, and they write about this and they write about that, and then suddenly there's a view that is prevailing, and 10% of people don't take a vaccine, and our children might catch measles in school as a result of that. Really absolutely bad. That's why I'm very trenchant in saying that those things are idiotic. I don't mind. I don't have hairs on my tongue when it comes to describing these things as idiotic. If you want to know whether your child should have a vaccine or not, go to a doctor. Don't go on social media. But what really worries me is that was happening in what we might call not the gestation period of social media, which is when I came into it in 2010, 2011, not in the sort of early days of social media. It's happening just as social media is maturing into something even worse. Because as AI is coming, and we have seen what bots have done and all the rest of it to social media, as AI is coming, we're sailing the world into an era where you will no longer be able to believe your eyes. So this, which some people were stupid enough to believe just because they were told by someone, is going to be something that person can ask an AI to produce an image of, and then if they were stupid enough to believe it just because it came out of someone's mouth, they're of course going to be idiotic enough to believe it if they see it in an AI created video or photograph that most people might be able to spot is AI for now, but in the future nobody will be able to spot is AI as it gets better. So if you now say this medicine causes this problem, don't take it although it's essential, or this vaccine causes this problem, don't take it although it's essential, you'll be able to produce a picture or a video of somebody injecting that medicine and appearing to suffer the consequence that you say. Sailing the world into that new era where you cannot believe your eyes is going to be, for me, the biggest ever change we have come across. And we've been through some big ones, and there are probably more coming. But AI is going to be revolutionary, and it's going to be particularly revolutionary for politics. I look forward to watching the podcast of you interviewing the politician that becomes responsible in Gibraltar for either my role or other roles in the future, and see how they dealt with that, because that is going to be very, very, very difficult indeed.
It's interesting. You've kind of gone the whole path that I wanted to eventually get to. We've done it in the first question, but
sorry.
Even if they don't believe the AI video, what will happen is nobody will believe anything.
Yes, quite.
Eventually, everything would be so muddy
Quite.
that, and that we're already seeing that. No? There's a bit.
We might look back one day and think that the video of Trump Gaza was actually quite a cute, quaint little thing compared to what's coming.
Yeah. Yep. And in that world where nothing can be trusted and we continue down this path of sort of deconstructing the things we've built in society, the certainties that we have, politics becomes an almost impossible thing to do. And how do we, because what we're seeing, Gibraltar is a very small player in a very big world. We're seeing even very big players in the world struggle to put constraints on this technology and the pernicious impacts in society. And we have this kind of sort of mindless tech forward general policy to this, and we'll see where this takes us, and then we'll handle the fallout. How do you see from your sort of vantage point, how do political leaders take this on?
So I think the only thing you can do is teach. You can only teach people that the things that they are seeing are not to be trusted without verification. You can only point to traditional journalism and established media as the check that they might need to keep in mind. Do also talk yourself down from disaster and trust the human being. I mean, in 1977, we saw a spaceship fly across the sky with lasers shooting, and we saw a man fly with a red cape in a way that was believable for the first time. It didn't take that for us to believe that, because we've been reading it in comics since the 1930s in DC Comics. But no one's jumping off buildings with red capes thinking that they can fly, or at least the numbers aren't affecting the population in any meaningful way.
No.
So you've got to also accept that people are also, at the same time, the vast majority of them, discerning. And you've got to trust that people are discerning. And to an extent, that's been politics for certainly in the television age. It's about, allowing people to be discerning about what they see of the politician, what they hear, how they decide who they trust and they don't trust. And people still, in the main, get it right. Although my opponents think people got it right 4 times over, got it wrong 4 times over. I think they got it right probably every time since elections started in this place.
Yet we see extremely intelligent, bright entrepreneurs, visionaries, people like Elon Musk, for example, whose role in modern politics or in the political discussion, a lot of people criticize. We see sort of the people who have sort of long careers and respectable careers align with these new populist narratives. And spout the narrative, the anti-establishment narrative, the one that narrative that destroys all the certainties we have. Can we really trust people's discernment? Like, are we not seeing that we are more emotional creatures than rational creatures when it comes to this?
That is one analysis. I'm not going to call it superficial because it may not be. But I think that there are deeper things happening. For example, in the United States, my view is that the left let itself down. And by letting itself down, it let in the right. Ask yourself whether all of the things that were done by the people that you've described, Bannon, Musk, all the others, would have led to a Republican victory with President Trump becoming 47th president, if the left had not dropped the ball quite like it did on Afghanistan, on trans rights, where I think the left probably now rues the day that it went so far so quickly. And this comes back to an issue that we've dealt with in Gibraltar, for example, on reproductive rights, on rights on sexual equality. I was always very clear where my moral compass was taking me towards that equality, to all of those issues. But I was also very clear that I couldn't kick the door down just because those were my beliefs and I could force them down people's throats. I thought that people needed to understand that we had reached the right moment in respect of each of those things. Now, I'm not ultra right wing, as you know, but I'm a father. And I'm also the father of a daughter. If you said to me, the choice is between voting for Donald Trump, who will stop grown men who decide to dress as women to go into the same toilet as your daughter and potentially expose her to sexual violence, or vote for the Democrats, when my ideological affinity is always with the Democrats. I believe in sexual equality. I believe in trans rights and all the rest of it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I would have voted Democrat.
Okay.
It's that tough. It goes to the core of what you do as a human being. You protect your young. Yeah. And a father protecting his daughter, I think, is the sort of thing that was happening in a lot of what I was reading around what was going on in the election. A lot of people held their noses and voted Trump on issues like that. People who might be in the center, people might be on the left, but not so far to the left, you know, and there's where I really do think that people like Starmer and Streeting, and the center left in the United Kingdom have got it right, and where the extreme left get it completely wrong. They get it completely wrong because they might be onto a right idea, but they're radical about how it has to happen because it has to happen because the idea is right, and there's no consideration of the consequences of that. And I think that's the sort of thing that was happening in America, that I was reading a lot under the surface about those sorts of things being the things that worried middle Americans. Then, of course, President Biden had a crisis with the cost of living. It's about the economy, stupid. It's got nothing to do with social media or not social media. If people can't afford the eggs, happening now as much as it happened to President Biden.
Prices haven't gone down.
Prices haven't gone down. Prices never go down.
Yeah.
Prices just go up and wait for salaries to catch up. And then they spring up when Putin invades Ukraine, and they spring up when Liz Truss decides that we can borrow more than we can afford to. But they never come down.
But the people who are complaining against the cost of living crisis no longer seem to have a problem. So again, there's so much incoherence. Like, this world is so muddied and so Trumpism for me is almost impossible to define. It's so full of contradictions. I really find it hard for people to understand unless, like you say, they latch on to a single issue they feel very strongly about and forget about all the rest. It's just full of contradictions.
If Trump is a businessman, then what he needs is to find a route to market. And if his objective is the White House, and the route is being very clear about the things that really matter to Americans, whether he delivers that message through social media with all the ills that you and I have identified that anti-social media suffers today, or whether he does it on CBS 60 Minutes in the old way and on the front page of the New York Times, tested by journalists or not tested by journalists, I think you still achieve the same result. Let me give you an example. There's no Truth Social on which Reform is doing well. Reform, of course, are on social media, but that's not their platform. And Reform are in working men's clubs. They're in the Telegraph and in the Times, and they're on the BBC and in the Westminster Parliament. They're selling the same message. Immigrants are taking your job. There's an issue with the left going too far on the diversity agenda. That's affecting your life, and it's affecting Britain as a whole. It's affecting your family. That's a very powerful message. Those are the issues that we have to understand, push things over the edge. So we've got to balance where we want to get to, if we believe in equality, if we believe in diversity, so that we don't open the door to this backlash that is created when you go too fast. I mean, I've had those issues here, for example, with my dear friend, when we're not talking about issues of politics, Marlene Hassan, who wanted to go much further, much faster on all of these equality issues. All that would have created would have been that huge backlash in Gibraltar, and it would have meant that we might not have got as far as we've got, and we've got very, very, very far indeed.
So you've gone very openly and boldly into the culture war issue, which is, for many politicians, I think, particularly on the left, now become a bit of a minefield. A lot of people who've studied this phenomenon talk about how in the sort of 60s and 70s, the left sort of splintered, or there was a decoupling between the agenda of the working class, the more kind of Marxist, orthodox kind of the revolutionary class struggle, and the universities, the intellectuals, these sort of progressive elites, which because the conditions for revolution were no longer, because in the 60s and 70s, the baby boom generation, the economy was doing very well. The washing machines were doing more for the feminist agenda than speeches in universities. It created this rupture. I'd like to know, what kind of a socialist were you growing up? Would you read Marx and Lenin? Were you into that kind of orthodoxy at all?
Yo paso de eso por completo. I'm about what's happening now. Of course, that can inform you, but what matters is that working people should have the same opportunities for them and for their children, so long as they work hard. For me, socialism is a meritocracy writ large, and the ability to have the basics provided for. So 100% I'm behind the idea that everyone needs to have full health cover, full education, all of these things. That for me is the basics. But I want to go further. And this is where I found Joe Bolsonaro so inspiring. Because
he is that kind of socialist, right?
No, I don't think he is, no. No. I think that's where you get it wrong. Joe Bolsonaro is the pivot between that type of socialism and where we are today, making people's lives better. And he pivots in a way that I think very few have understood before, and he becomes a demonstration of, which is to say, well, look, I believe in these ideas of equality, and I digest the ideology of Marx, Lenin, and everybody else, and Engels and all the rest of it, and I come to apply that to the modern world, which is in a capitalist system that we're not going to destroy. And I use the capitalist system to produce the income that I need as recurrent expenditure to deliver a socialist panacea in Gibraltar in a way that is relevant in 1988 and thereafter. In other words, by then, in the United Kingdom, people were going to university. In Gibraltar, very few people were going to university to pay for the universities, to turn the system that had begun under Hassan of the group practice medical scheme into the modern GHA. Although the GHA was created in the last few years of the AACR, but it really starts to roll under Bolsonaro in a different way. And therefore in education, in health, in housing, where the revolution comes. I mean, Joe Bolsonaro, the socialist, Marxist, Leninist that you're talking about in terms of ideology, is the person who introduces the concept of home ownership in Gibraltar, which in the United Kingdom, you might say, well, yes, of course it was there because there's more space, but it's Thatcher that really is the person that turns the United Kingdom into a nation of homeowners. It's Bolsonaro in Gibraltar. Because, he is that pivot that enables us to become working class people who can really benefit from capitalism in a way that delivers the socialist benefits that we're entitled to. I grew up in a working class home. I get my degree. I'm able to go to a great university to do so. I come back as a professional. I go into the legal profession. In the legal profession, I'm exposed from Gibraltar to the whole world and financing structures, etc., etc. And I'm able to use that to up my family's game. And, that is, in my view, exactly how it needs to continue to happen. The standard is always going up. The working class in Gibraltar now have more, even if they, in some instances, might not have enough, but they have more than the working class used to have. And in my day, we had more than my parents had when they were younger. And that is the constant progression that we have to deliver. Are we getting, though, to a world, a Musk-like world, where robots are all the working people or working things in our economy, and we're just hanging around chatting to each other? I don't think we'll ever get there. I don't think that's what the future holds. I think robots and AI will make us each as human economic actors more efficient, and we have to engage with it because the person sitting opposite us will be engaging with it, and we have to have that speed of response and recollection that AI will have from what we have already produced as human beings. So that's where I am.
And you say that you were never a kind of dogmatic style socialism, even when you were younger.
I'm not a dogmatic style anything, to tell you the truth. I don't believe in dogma.
Mm. But have any of your ideas kind of matured or changed in this time that you've been in politics?
Yeah, a lot, of course. I mean, because you see how things work. You learn how things work and you adapt to how those things work, and you become less idealistic about how things might happen, and you become more realistic about how you deliver them. And that's the reality of politics in Gibraltar as well. As soon as you have dealt with all of those idealistic issues that you're first elected on, and you're left with the realism, you start to become more effective, because you still need to have not idealistic ideas, excited, forward-looking ideas. You need to want to be able to do things here, yeah? There's no point being elected just to be elected. And to an extent, it's one of the criticisms of my political opponents. I mean, they went into the last election saying that what they wanted to do was go back and look at what we'd done, rather than say to Gibraltar, say to my children and to other people's children, if they're of voting age, this is where we want to take Gibraltar in the next decade or two. I think Joe Bossano did that. I think Peter Cavana did that with Peter Montelifu in 95, 96. And I think I did that, ironically, with Joe Bossano in 2011, 12 with Jose Garcia and the whole very exciting team that we put together then. We told people where we wanted to go. And I think the next leader that wants to take Gibraltar forward needs to do that too. And it doesn't matter what political party they come from. In other words, the idea that because the GSLP Liberals may have won 4 elections, it can't be a GSLP Liberal leader that shows people where the takeoff ramp is for their vision of where to take Gibraltar in the 15 years is for the birds. People will buy the vision of either a new GSLP Liberal leader or, if I may say so with respect to my current principal political opponent, a new GSD leader that has that vision. Because what Keith has shown is that he has nothing to show. He's not showing us where he wants to take us, other than I'm so terrible that I need to be audited, I need to be this, I need to be that, right? That's not what politics is about. Politics is about doing. And if there's one thing that's really changed in me, it's that I'm even more determined to help Gibraltar continue to move. And whoever is the next leader of the people of Gibraltar can count on me, of course, to be there to support them if they have a vision that I can share in of where we're going. I hope that's going to be the leader of my party. I shall always be in the GSLP. The GSLP has given me everything, and I will always be loyal to the GSLP. But of course, as a former chief minister, I will also be there for another chief minister should they need my support, even if he or she's of another political party. But it's about that vision for where we're going to take Gibraltar. And as long as that doesn't contradict the GSLP's fundamental views as to socialism, a la Gibraltareña, or sovereignty, and anybody else can count on me to support them also.
See, this takes us very nicely to when we're getting to close the interview. I would like to talk about the future Gibraltar that is unfolding right now in this new treaty that's materializing. How do you see this new Gibraltar shaping up in the next decade or two? And what parts of the old Gibraltar do you not want to see change?
Well, I mean, I'm very excited about what this opportunity brings. But in terms of business, I mean, I think this is good for business in Gibraltar. I think it's going to do great for our economy and for our public finances, because our public finances do well when our economy produces more. And when our public finances do well, then our public services can be better. That means we can look after our children and our elderly well, and ourselves in the GHA. It also means that we have the whole of Europe open to us for leisure and entertainment purposes. And we're open to the whole of Europe for leisure and entertainment purposes, which is a business in itself to a very great extent. But that's it. Nothing fundamental is going to change. Nothing in our constitutional order, in the way that we educate, in the way that we run Gibraltar, is going to change as a result of this treaty. We're going to adapt ourselves to the EU's rules on goods. Well, 96% of the stuff that we get comes through the frontier. That means it's adapted to the EU rules on goods. And I don't think we'll have many problems getting stuff from the UK because of SPS arrangements being done between the UK and the EU. So none of that's going to change. Okay, the way that people come into Gibraltar is going to change in terms of the immigration system in a way that is totally sovereignty safe. But it's more or less the same database, because the Schengen Information System and the Interpol database are more or less the same. So that's not going to change anything fundamental. This is going to mean that fluidity is going to be greater, both in respect of people and goods. It's what we set out to do, right? Doesn't change anything in Gibraltar. The fundamental things about Gibraltar: respect for the rule of law, playing things in a British style and having a Westminster style model of government. Where Gibraltar starts, where Gibraltar ends, who's responsible for Gibraltar immigration, who makes the final decisions in respect of who comes into Gibraltar, all the things that protect us. None of that changes. So I want to see that mature even further. I want to see the relationship with the United Kingdom mature even further. We haven't had time to really look at constitutional reform. We have to start that now. As we get through ratification and implementation, it's time to press go on where the constitution is going, because the relationship between the United Kingdom and Gibraltar is excellent. It's very, very strong. It's based on respect. And we need to somehow see whether the Constitution of 2006, which is, in my view, to a very great extent, Peter Kafana drafting the Constitution that Joe Bossano delivers by 1996 de facto, we'll see whether that needs to mature a little. And there are some areas which we've seen need to change. In particular, during the course of the McGrail inquiry, we could see that there were some things there that needed to change, would have made things a lot easier in the context of those thorny issues. That's what I would like to see really bed in even more for another 2 decades, in a way that means that 4 decades after 2006, we're not saying this constitution is already 40 years old and needs to be done. I would rather that we were looking at it all the time. Those are the things that go to the really fundamental things, the Bobby on the street, the things that make Gibraltar, the safety that we associate with where our children are. None of that can change. The treaty changes none of it, but creates opportunities at an economic level and at a human level for us to interact with Europe. I'm very pleased that we've been able to deliver it. There were times when it felt like it might not happen because we were very, very tough in the negotiation. Our negotiating opponents were also very, very tough on the things that mattered to them. But we've got there.
What if we remove from the equation the main source of friction, the frontier, and we press fast forward 10, 20 years? I mean, obviously, a right-wing government could come in any minute and ruin all of that. Not necessarily ruin the treaty and the frontier, but this scenario that I'm trying to project, of harmony and lack of friction, and move to another stage in relations where it's not about confrontation, but about collaboration. Do you see socio-culturally any changes? Would you like to see? Would you not like to see? The thing that people have talked about for a long time is the idea that there'll be some kind of cultural osmosis, no?
I don't believe in cultural osmosis. I think cultural osmosis would be a bad thing. I don't want it. I want Gibraltar to stay Gibraltar, and I want Spain to stay Spain, and the Campo de Gibraltar to stay the Campo de Gibraltar. But if they're going to say Shinga because they come here and buy chewing gum, that's a good thing. That's not cultural osmosis. That's enrichment from one side to the other. And we say Shinga too. And so what? Yeah. I don't believe there will be cultural osmosis. I mean, to a very great extent, I've said this before. This is just Back to the Future. My father used to talk to me about coming into Gibraltar without a frontier. They used to have a house in the area of Balmones, and they'd come to Gibraltar, which is where they had their main home. Before the Second World War, there was no frontier. It was all very easy. It didn't have a cultural effect in Gibraltar in terms of cultural osmosis. In fact, we've built on all of that and we've become more British. So I don't think we're going to become less British to a very great extent. If you have a concern about cultural osmosis, you have to have it about the world. My children don't watch the BBC. They watch YouTube. Yeah. Some guy in Florida doing something stupid with a skateboard when he sort of slides into his own pool. That's what my children watch. And my children say apartment instead of flat. They don't say apartamento or piso. They hardly speak Spanish. The fact that there isn't going to be a frontier, there's not going to change that. They might actually speak some Spanish if they were able to play football with people in La Linea a little bit more often than we do now and all the rest of it. But the cultural issue, that's happening on their personal devices. And I'm very worried about that because, that is really what's changed Gibraltar. It started with Sky News and Sky Television so that we didn't have to watch Televisión Española anymore. So we didn't watch the cartoons in Spanish so we don't speak Spanish. And it moved from the big screen, the thick old big screen, to the screen on the wall, and from the screen on the wall to the screen in their hands. And now YouTube is here. That cultural osmosis is more challenging and it's more difficult to grapple with. And the fact that we're going to go back to be able to come and go from Spain as British citizens taught in British schools, the national curriculum of the United Kingdom, which is what gives you who you are, to go to, I'm so old, I still want to call it Brica, to Carrefour and buy something from a French company in southern Spain. Yeah. I think those are things that are not to worry about. The Gibraltarian culture, Gibraltarian psyche is stronger than that.
As we discussed with Jonathan Scott in The Needle, which is another program I made, which I don't think you were that much of a fan of.
No, I think your polls were completely wrong.
Gibraltar has become more British for sure, and linguistically, you see the younger generations, it's undeniable, but also more self-assured about its own identity. The more open it has been since the close frontier years. No, so in that
by the way,
sense,
the children are speaking English. They're not speaking British English. They're speaking American English. Yep, apartment. Yeah, let's get in the elevator. Yeah, let's get in the lift to go to the flat. These are issues which do worry me.
Okay, so we've taken enough time.
My children don't eat chips; they eat fries. How can that happen?
Stop that from happening.
Yeah,
punish them.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you for helping us, take on this new government initiative. We want to make sure that we stick with the times and that we, move with the shifting paradigms, that we are there to inform people, to give them an open sort of view into what we do in government, so they understand what we do. We're going to talk to departments, we're going to talk to senior civil servants, but also to our politicians, and try to give them a slightly different angle. So thank you so much for letting us do that.
A pleasure. Con salud.
Thank you. Marlene, Dalli, Christian, Olivares, welcome to Not Another Press Release. This is the second recording that we do in this new studio. We thought of bringing you in because currently you have the Women's Mentorship program going on. Tell us a little bit about the program and how it's gone.
Yeah, so we've just opened the applications for the 7th cycle of the Women's Mentorship program. We've been running the program since 2018. And to date, we've had over 200 participants, including mentees and mentors. Application closed on Friday. And we're very keen to invite applications from women, who reside in Gibraltar and who are over 18, from, the public and private sector, from the NGO sector, and also from women who are currently not in employment. So it's quite a diverse and inclusive program. And, in the past, we have had representation from many different sectors. So we're very excited about meeting our new cohort of mentees, and getting to meet them, learn about them, and for them to work together as well as working with their mentors.
We have to apologize because Amy, who is one of the female members of the press office, who are going to be here today, she's not feeling great, so Daniel has offered to take over. We want these conversations about sort of current events within the public sector to be sort of group chats that are more laid back.
More casual, less official.
Yeah.
And being in front of the media, in front of the cameras and all that.
But I had a chat with her earlier, and she told me to ask you something which she found quite interesting, which is that the uptake for the course is mostly non-Gibraltarian. And you just mentioned that you mentioned Gibraltar residents.
Yes.
Is it because you're getting more non-Gibraltarian applicants than people from here? And why is this happening?
Yeah, we don't tend to ask people what their nationality is. So we ask, that they're resident in Gibraltar. That's one of the criteria. And we have had people whose original nationality or who are nationals from, quite diverse countries and who are currently working here. We've had people from, I think Tajikistan, for example, or Azerbaijan, I think it might have been, obviously, people who've come to Gibraltar, recently or in the last few years and are finding their feet personally and professionally. So they're looking for kind of a network of support. And I think that the program offers that to people who are recently moved to Gibraltar for reasons of employment. So we're happy to provide that support. So really, we don't really we don't ask people what the nationality is, but that information tends to filter through in the induction session and as we get to know them. So yeah, many of our mentees have spoken different languages.
Yeah.
It's really quite interesting to meet people from across the globe.
Have you ever talked about this quite interesting fact? There's obviously many more local women here than women that come from abroad. Do you think that there's a little bit of a stigma locally with sort of seeking support and encouragement and or acknowledging that you have vulnerabilities? I mean, we did some videos this week with Rina Verdi, who's works locally at the GHA. She's a doctor. Does a lot of public messaging for the GHA. And she mentioned how she wasn't really aware that she needed mentorship until she did the program and got a lot out of it. No? So I was wondering if you guys had some thoughts about that.
I think it's been quite balanced. The proportions or the ratios have been quite balanced between sort of Gibraltarian-born women and women who have been born elsewhere. I think the program has gained a lot of traction. I think that maybe there hasn't been a history of mentorship in Gibraltar for Gibraltarian women, and maybe we've kind of broken new ground over the last 6-8 years. Obviously in Gibraltar, if you're Gibraltarian, you tend to have a fairly good network of support, your family, your friends, which may be something that people who are coming to work in Gibraltar don't have. So maybe they're perhaps in slightly greater need, perhaps, or they feel that need more acutely than perhaps somebody who was born here and has an extensive support network. But I think it's generally been fairly balanced.
I would tend to say the same. Yeah, it's not something that we've looked at specifically. No, we've never. Although we've got a lot of statistics, is not something that we've looked specifically to see how many are from Gibraltar and how many are not. But yeah, I would concur with Marlene. I think a rough estimate would be about 50% mainly.
What about the younger generation? Because obviously mentorship program sounds ideal for people who are younger. Like I look back when I was younger and like the people that I sort of connected with and the people that sort of took me under their wing in my career, and they were, that was a massive help for me to learn how things work or whatever industry you're in, the ins and outs. And do you find that you're getting young people applying, or is it a mixture of everything?
A bit of everything, I would say. Yeah, we've had some people also who are a bit older and want to change their career path, who find themselves a bit stagnant position in their career, and they're looking for something new, and they need somebody who's outside of their network to speak to give them that little bit of a push. And, it tends to be quite favorable for them. At the end of the day, that's what they're looking for, that little push.
Yeah, I do think a mentor is always so much more valuable sometimes than doing a course, maybe, because, the lessons you learn from people in the real world is very different to what you learn in a classroom or in an academic point of view. And I was interested to see if the younger people are kind of catching on.
Yeah, I think we have mentees who come to the program from different ages, for different reasons. They have different sort of intended outcomes or goals. So it's quite diverse. We in the last cycle, we did have quite a number of young women, probably in their 20s. And then we also had, sprinklings of women perhaps in their 40s, or like Christian said, may have hit kind of a ceiling or a wall and are looking for somebody to help them break through that. Going back to the thing of, is it people from Gibraltar or women from Gibraltar or outside who are turning to the program? I think that on the one hand, although women in Gibraltar have a fairly extensive network of supports, it's not always easy to have somebody who can be objective, who can look at things from a fresh perspective because everything is loaded. So I think that's invaluable. Having somebody who's outside of that network and who can give you a fresh insight, that's invaluable. And I think that many people appreciate that.
And what's been the response, not just in this iteration, but throughout the program? And also I'd like to know if there's been any kind of you can describe it as like negative kind of feedback, because issues to do with equality and in particular to do with women's equality sometimes elicit strange backlashes online, particularly. And this is a place where you want to talk about big picture issues. So I'd like to have a conversation about how you deal with that reality.
I think that, so for example, I believe that when the Department of Equality was first set up, the focus, because it was a very, very small team, the focus was initially on disability matters. And of course, my colleague, Jenny Victory, continues to lead on that with the Supported Needs and Disability Office. And obviously the department has grown slightly, and therefore, when I moved to the Ministry of Equality, I was able to support on gender equality matters. And I think that whenever any initiatives are carried out or implemented or new ideas are put forward with regards to disability, everybody is on board. Everybody accepts that that is necessary, that it's essential, that it's to do with equality and human rights and so on. When it comes to some of the other protected characteristics, people are not perhaps as comfortable with any initiatives that may support a particular demographic. And I think the issue there is to perhaps convince or persuade people that these initiatives are necessary, and we can look at things like international research and studies and local statistics to support that. So I do think there's a slightly different reaction sometimes depending on the protected characteristic that we're trying to support.
And where do you feel we are right now? Because I feel that there's been sort of a wave of like sort of pushback, you know? And that wave feels to me like it's now changing a little bit. I mean, what are you guys experienced in the last few years?
I think it's getting a bit better, no? With time, people get more used to it, no? Before, the way that, we're exposed to more technology, social media, and all these, it becomes more, people get more accustomed to it, no? Seeing it in the news, seeing it on TV, in the internet. So it's not like it's just happening here. It's happening all over the world. Everybody's getting used to everything that's coming out, no?
Yeah, I think that certain things are perhaps more deeply embedded, have become the norm on the one hand, and yet at the same time, last year when we traveled to the Commission of the Status of Women in New York, the United Nations, there was a lot of talk about backlash and the rollback of rights, perhaps more so because we were in the US. So whilst on the one hand, certain things have become more embedded and more kind of acceptable, I think that the push for equality is never necessarily linear. It might be similar to kind of perhaps physical fitness. Now they say that it's kind of a roller coaster. So I think that equality matters are on a bit of a roller coaster. And there's a lot of political movements across Europe and in the US where there's a lot of talk about rolling back rights, and certain rights have been repealed. So we are committed to pushing the agenda forward. We appreciate that globally. There are many actors that would are not in favor of certain rights. And we always have to be vigilant of that. And I think that there seems to be, because it's difficult nowadays to know if it's fake news or AI generated or whatever, but there seems to be a rise in terms of misogyny online particularly. And that is something that I think that concerns us, and that has that we've endeavoured to tackle through our International Men's Day work, and talking about masculinities and things like that. So, we try to keep an eye on what's happening globally, because we know that at some point that's going to filter through. And obviously people are on social media, and so before, perhaps if you lived in a particular jurisdiction, that was your experience of the world, and nowadays we're getting messages and from all sources and from all countries. So
it's also like a good way to separate the disinformation from misinformation. So disinformation has a negative ulterior motive attached to it. Misinformation is you seeing something online and not realizing that it's incorrect, and then you just share it. There's no malice involved. And I think with a lot of these issues, I mean, especially recently in the last few years, especially in the US, there's a huge sort of disinformation campaign happening online, and because everything gets filtered out to all the different social media platforms, you get, your Andrew Tates and all these sort of macho men podcasts who are trying to generate this following based on these ideals, which when you start and sort of researching it, it's crazy. So then from where you guys work from and from what you guys see, do you see that being a danger in GIB anytime soon?
So far, the worst thing we usually get is one of the comments you always get is equalised pension age. Yeah, so that's like every single comment on any sort of gender equality policy or news has that tag next to it.
Yeah, I think that we've come a long way, and I don't think that current rights that we enjoy and the current legislation that is in place, we have the Equal Opportunities Act 2006 and other pieces of legislation that protect people's rights. I cannot imagine, and I hope we will never have a Gibraltar where any of that is repealed or removed. So I don't see that happening. What can shift are sort of cultural attitudes and whether we are more or less tolerant of gender stereotypes, for example. And I think that certain gender stereotypes are very entrenched in our community. And I think that's where the work needs to be done. But we're a team of two. We're quite hardworking. But, changing a culture, changing certain attitudes cannot happen quickly. It cannot happen overnight. And it does take the work of a community to do that. So I think more discussions around cultural norms and gender stereotypes is imperative. And that's some of the work that we've been doing lately as well.
And Christian, I'm curious to know, as a man, how does it feel to sort of engage with this, what we were discussing earlier, this sort of manosphere, sort of anti-feminist wave that happens, not so much in Gibraltar, but around the world?
Well, I mean, I'm just another government worker in the office, and for me, it's part of the job, really. I mean, I take it to heart as well. I like what I do, and obviously my views are very similar to Marlene, so we align very well in that sense. We collaborate quite well, I think. And yeah, obviously, what Daniel was saying earlier, it was the same thing with all the undertakes and all this. We have to be very careful with where they go with. We can't always let people believe everything that's on the internet, and we need to be very careful. It's very easy to put a message. Anybody can put a message and anybody can believe them at the end of the day. They don't need to be a doctor. They don't need to have any qualification. Anybody can just go there and send messages out. And if they become, for some reason, popular in any way, they can have a following and then can become dangerous.
And that's without touching AI,
we're
into uncharted territory in the next few years.
Yeah,
so that's going to be.
I think a lot has been said, about the algorithms and how, as soon as a young teenage boy goes online, within so many minutes, certain things are sort of fed to them. I'm trying to get rid of the Korean mask on my algorithmic feed, which I've not stopped to look at. So I think, there is a growing consciousness around the impact of social media on teens, and we know that some countries like Australia have introduced a ban, and the UK is considering a ban. So I think that young boys in particular can be sort of sucked down a rabbit hole, which becomes increasingly misogynistic and so on, which at the beginning may be around things like working out, being fit, attracting women for heterosexual men, and then that becomes something quite dramatically different a few weeks or even hours down the line. So I think relapsing to talk about controls and controlling information, but I think it is important to protect our young people from information that can be very damaging to themselves and consequently to other people as well.
I've been involved in political communications for a long time, and I've seen the discussion shift away from certain things. So, for example, I still use the term feminism a lot, but you don't really hear it that much anymore. You find, even though if you think about it and you analyze it, it's all about equality between men and women. It's very little else, no? But it's been tarnished. Do you feel that you've had to adjust the way you talk about your subject matter to the sensibilities we have now?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about gender equality and I consider myself a gender equality advocate. My initial work when I was working as a teacher at Westside School was around marking International Women's Day and International Day of the Girl Child. And then because boys began to be part of the school cohort in the upper years, then I realized that it was also important for them to feel part of the school community and for us to talk about International Men's Day. So we started our work on that around mental health and suicide prevention, which are issues that affect men and boys in higher numbers than they do women. So I think that each demographic may have issues that are more particular to a particular demographic than to another. And I don't think there's anything untoward about doing that. I do recall, and I did say recently, that when I first started marking that day, there were lots of people who tried to dissuade, not lots, but a few people just tried to dissuade me from doing it, because, they seemed to think it would jar against the work that we were doing for International Women's Day and that it was at odds in some way. But I felt that I couldn't do work for one group and not support another group.
I've heard people talk about this as some form of appeasement, no, of a reactionary idea, no? I mean, I imagine that's the kind of backlash you're talking about.
I don't think it was a backlash as such. It's just that I wasn't sure how it was going to land. But I felt that if we spoke about mental health and we spoke about suicide prevention, I didn't feel that anybody could say we were doing something that was negative. So that was my guiding point. Should we mark International Men's Day? I'm not sure. There is a lot of discussion and debate in the UK at the moment around men's health. There is, I believe, a health strategy for men and boys. It seems to be perhaps, I find that people try to pitch men and women or the issues of men and women against each other. And I find that very negative. I don't think there is a problem about talking about the issues that a particular demographic faces, whether it's older persons in the community, younger persons, and so on and so forth. But I do find that there are certain groups that try to make it like a battle. And I think that's doing a disservice to everybody in the community. Mm-hmm. And I think in Gibraltar, we're extremely supportive of one another. And I think that we should try and think like what is best for people. And I don't think we should ever try to pitch things as, somebody trumping over somebody else or one group being superior over another. It's about allowing everybody to do their best. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of that happening in the UK at the moment. But at the same time, there are strides to address the issues that affect men in higher numbers. So things around education, things around men's health. And I think that's a positive. If those, educational attainment and mental health or health outcomes are improved for men, I mean, who's going to complain about that?
Men, from what we've learned, men usually don't tend to go to the doctor as much, and they don't tend to talk about their issues. And I found that before we start having celebrating International Men's Day, that it wasn't. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, why do we have to have a men's day? No, what was the need?" I was one of them, no? As well, I have to admit. But then after working and seeing all the different issues that some men face and that don't talk about, and why they don't talk about all of these, then we realize that this is something that we need to talk about, to bring to the fore, so that people are aware that it's okay to talk about these things. Yeah. And it's very important, because at the end of the day, it can affect if you don't share your issues and your vulnerabilities with other people. You just, stay stuck in that rut.
Yeah, I think especially being a closed community, like, small and everyone knows each other. And speaking from my experience, when I needed to go to a therapist because I was having panic attacks, and I couldn't really find out what was happening. And the people you speak to, your friends, your close friends, your family, whatever, some people have this idea, if you tell them you're going to a therapist, there's something wrong with you. Something wrong with you mentally, but in a negative connotation. And I think we've come leaps and bounds. This was around 5, 6, 8, 7 years ago, where now you can kind of open up and tell people, yeah, I'm seeing a therapist. It's like going to the GP, essentially. And I think we've done a very good job into kind of transferring that negative connotation of seeing, you're going to a psychologist or a psychotherapist, or whatever you're seeing, to being able to speak openly about it and tell people, yeah, I've got a therapist appointment. I can't make the band practice, like in my example, for example. And, I think I think that is key to sort of like treat mental health just as you treat an injury on your body. At the end of the day, you get hurt, you go to the doctors. If you're mentally, hurt or whatever, something's draining you and dragging you down, you go to the doctors, which is a therapist or whatever you prefer.
I think there's many organizations that have been working on mental health, some sort of for a very long time, like the Gibraltar Mental Welfare Society, under Conchita Triay, particularly in the last few years. We also have GIPSAMs. So a lot of our work leads us to work with different stakeholders, NGOs and charities. I think the work that GIPSAM's done is very important. We've also connected and collaborated with charities like Walking Together, which is about suicide bereavement. So we've learnt about that and the impacts of that, and have close links with Sean Keating, who leads on that, and his committee. So we've learnt a lot, in the last few years. We've connected with different NGOs, and we're learning about all these issues and learning about the support that exists for different members of our community, and the very positive work that is being undertaken by volunteers.
Okay, so sort of going back to where we started.
We've come a long way.
The mentorship program and this initiative that tries to sort of empower women of all ages and all walks of life. What would you say right now is what women in Gibraltar generally yeah, it might be very difficult to talk about the whole demographic, but where would you say we need to focus our attention? Do we need to continue striving to make things better for women and more egalitarian generally between genders?
The focus of this program is to make women to develop them more, in whatever they feel that they are lacking, we've had women joining for very different reasons. Lots of them wanting to develop skills, and like Marlene mentioned before, build a bigger network. It can be very dependent on each person. No? At the end of the day, it's not like a general thing. Every person is looking for something at the end of the day. And this program is very specific. It's not like going to a class and everybody's learning the same thing. It's what that person is going for, that mentor will try and help them for that specific thing. So depends on what you're looking for at the end of the day. Some just need the motivation, encouragement, that little bit of TLC at the end of the day. And that's what it's as simple as that. Or some people are just looking for something like that. Or others can be a bit more, need more help in a specific project and need that more specific guidance. So
yeah, I think that the program is great because you have that individual support on the one hand from somebody who's very experienced. And then what we've done in the last couple of cycles, we've introduced group mentee sessions. So they all come together. And we have somebody lead a session for them. And sometimes either we choose the theme or we ask the participants to choose a theme. So last year we had things around confidence building, advocating for yourself, things like that. So, I just find it very interesting that when they come to the induction session, everybody's a bit wary, a bit shy, not all of them, but, the feeling sometimes is that, people don't know each other and there's a bit of sort of anxiety about what does all this mean and what do I have to do? And yet I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, we have people from across the globe. We have women who already done great things in their particular fields. And, how is it that they are so, doubtful of themselves, And I make that point to them repeatedly. I say already in this room, there's such a high level of experience, of expertise, of languages spoken, or having lived in, whatever countries they have. There's already so much talent and expertise in the room that it's, not sure what the word is, but I just find that it's so sad that they don't see that. Yeah. They don't see that in themselves. And
we were doing the videos to promote with all the ex-mentees. This was a recurring theme. Like I had self-doubt. I needed to help with my confidence. As a man, it doesn't happen when you're surrounded by men in similar circumstances. What you normally see is actually the opposite. No? Yeah. Perhaps sometimes an excess of confidence and not exactly the same level of expertise. Why does this happen?
I think, as a woman, I'm going to speak from a personal perspective. I think that we are often at the receiving end of messages, either overt or indirect, which tell you that you either don't belong, that you're not as good as, and that you're picking that up unconsciously all the time, whether it's through advertising, the media. So I think that we're picking that up and, the system as a whole seems to tell you, you don't quite belong for different reasons. And I think that authority is something that has traditionally been linked with men. So, there's that. We do some work around gender stereotypes when we deliver workshops on equality, diversity and inclusion. And we do that an exercise where we see that people often think of a particular gender when they think of a particular profession, and that still exists. So, although things have changed, I still think that there are certain patterns, certain expectations that are entrenched because of gender stereotypes.
And it's taken years as well, because you go back to the 60s, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen Mad Men, the TV show Mad Men. So it's based about Madison Avenue, New York, big advertising agency.
Yeah, I have watched it.
And they basically work with all the biggest brands in the world, but like when they are showing the officers, all the women are just sat down typing away as secretaries. Yeah. And there's a storyline in the show where one of them sort of starts as a secretary and sort of builds her way up. And it's like showing you that change in society, where women all of a sudden, once the stay-at-home moms taking care of the kids, they were working, but not only just working as a secretary, also being allowed to sort of go go up the corporate ladder. And that's like, it's based on a fictionalized version, but you know, that's in the 60s. And I think nowadays, you know, we've become more accustomed to seeing female CEOs and people in very high, powerful positions. I think
As long as it's the exception and not the norm, the stereotype won't change.
Yeah. I was reading that, with regards to that thing about the secretary, at the beginning, had men secretaries, and they would go quite readily up the corporate ladder. And then when women entered the workplace and they started perhaps as secretaries, that path on that ladder pulled up. We try to effect a little bit of change. And obviously change doesn't happen as quickly as we would like. But we're committed, you know, to the work that we do and the values that we hold. And we believe in a better Gibraltar, a more equal Gibraltar, where everybody, you know, has opportunity to be successful, happy, healthy, and an important part of the community. So those are our guiding sort of principles as people. And then of course we have our equality principles, you know, the 9 protected characteristics, that are covered in legislation that guide the work that we do.
Okay, that's a perfect way to end the podcast. We would like you to give us some kind of cultural recommendation. Could be a book, could be a film, could be a series, something that speaks to the work that you guys do. Anything you've read recently, a thinker perhaps, someone you would like to direct our viewers to.
Yeah, when I deliver training, I very often talk about John Amici. And John Amici was the first basketball player to play in the NBA. And back then I used to watch basketball. And then around COVID time, I kept hearing this name on social media and LinkedIn. And then it eventually twigged that this gentleman who was talking about equality and has his own company, I think, around organizational psychology, is the same person. And I've been following him since. And I find John Amici a very sort of sane, calm voice in a world that's become very divisive, particularly around equality matters. So I always talk about John Amici. I've bought one of his books. I think it's called The Promise or The Promises of Giants. And he's got another book out at the moment, which I can't quite recall, which I haven't bought. But I do find that it's important to follow people who are genuinely invested in effecting change, positive change. So John Amici is my go-to for like key quotes or, you know, so I find that his, words and insights, you know, he's a black man, he's gay. So his insights, you know, are particularly, valuable in that context of equality. And he advocates, you know, for different types of people.